Hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on decarbonising transport and the role for flexibility. This is the second webinar in our Future Energy Systems series, with experts discussing how can a flexible energy system help deliver net zero. Before we get started, I would like to go over a few items so you know how to participate in today's webinar. You've joined the presentation listening using your computer speaker system by default. If you would prefer to join over the telephone, just select telephone in the audio pane and the dial-in information will be displayed. You will have the opportunity to submit your questions to today's presenters by typing your questions into the questions pane of the control panel on the right-hand side of your screen. You can send in your questions at any time during the presentation, and we will collect these and address them to our presenters during the Q&A session at the end or afterwards via email. This webinar is being recorded and will be sent to attendees next week at the end of the three-part series. I would now like to introduce today's first presenter, Andrew Lever from the Carbon Trust.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. And welcome to the second in the series of 3 webinars that explores the role of flexibility in the Great Britain energy system. My name's Andrew Lever. I'm a director at the Carbon Trust, and I lead our work in energy systems. I'm also pleased to introduce Vincent Dureau from EDF Energy and Evie Trulov from UK Power Networks. Today's theme, of course, we will be exploring decarbonising transport sector and the role for flexibility. And I'll start with giving a brief introduction, of course, to the topic of flexibility and an overview of our Flexibility in Great Britain project. We'll then hear from today's speakers, Vincent and Evie, who will share their work and perspectives on flexibility over the course of a few slides. And then we'll flow into discussion chaired by myself. And of course, there will be an opportunity to submit questions during today's webinar through the chat function at any point in time. So next slide, please. So what is flexibility and why do we need it? So you see here on the slide Ofgem's definition, which is modifying generation and or consumption patterns in reaction to an external signal, which of course such as a change in price, to provide a service within the energy system. And I mean, in a sense, flexibility allows us to do more with less. And this is becoming, of course, increasingly important as we transition to net zero and become increasingly reliant upon more intermittent forms of generation and adapt to changes in demand patterns and energy vectors, and of course electric vehicles is a good example of those changing demand patterns. Flexibility allows network operators to reduce or defer reinforcement costs. It allows the greater use of renewable generation capacity. It improves system stability and reliability. And just coming back to the statement around, allowing us to do more with less, flexibility has that opportunity to allow us to meet net zero in a more cost-effective manner, which is, very important given the effort and the scale of investment that's required to transition to net zero. Next slide, please. So we know flexibility can add value, and the Carbon Trust, as some of you may be aware, has published already 2 reports a few years ago in 2016 on the value of flexibility to the electricity system and the least regrets approach to investment in flexibility. And both of these provided a very clear articulation on the value of flexibility in a future energy system and insight into an optimal portfolio given uncertainties in how the system may very well develop. Since then, of course, the decarbonisation of heat and transport and sectors have come more into focus, and rightly so. And given these developments, we've seen an increased interest across the sector in understanding the role and value of flexibility. But of course, what we don't know and what we want to explore, which the bottom 4 bullets on this chart are, how much more valuable flexibility is in meeting net zero compared to, an 80% reduction in carbon emissions, as was the previous target a few years ago. How does flexibility across the gas and electricity networks interact? What's the role of flexibility in decarbonising, heat and transport? And importantly, of course, what new commercial business models are required for flexibility to help meet net zero. Next slide, please. And on, to address these questions, and just introducing now, we just started the Flexibility in Great Britain project. In short, its aims are to develop a robust evidence base which supports the continued deployment of flexibility technologies in a cost-effective way. That's important because it then gives direction to industry and policymakers on the role of flexibility in a cost-effective transition. And again, equally important, of course, and more important is around understanding how the business models for flexibility and the requirements that they need to make them deliverable, investable, and viable. Of course, you'll see from this chart that we've convened a wide range of energy sector stakeholders who are supporting us, including Western Power Distribution, SSEN, Institution of Gas Energy Managers, EDF, UK Power Networks, Scottish Power Energy Networks, Bright Energy, SBM Offshore, Statera Energy, and the Greater London Authority. We've also set up an external stakeholder group that includes key stakeholders such as BEIS, Ofgem, the Committee on Climate Change, the National Infrastructure Commission, and National Grid ESO. And we're very keen to align with current policy and regulatory development and ensure our work and evidence can be impactful and helpful. We are supported by Imperial College London, who we've worked with on numerous previous projects, and they will be providing the modelling support to this particular project. Project's already started and will conclude by March 2021. And so, yeah, we'll be sharing more details and, of course, the outputs from that over that time frame. So on to today's webinar. I'm now very pleased to hand over to Vincent from EDF to share his perspectives on transport and flexibility. Vincent.
Thank you very much, Andrew. So maybe I will start with a quick introduction of EDF and what we are doing in the UK. So if you can move to the next slide and the next one as well, thank you. So this is really showing a little bit in one picture how we see EDF as being a partner for the transition to net zero, which is starting on the, I would say, up left-hand side with the low carbon generation, which is a mix of nuclear and renewable from an EDF point of view, but also as well including some what we call stationary battery storage, so grid level storage capability to bring the flexibility that we've just mentioned. And then, of course, as an energy supplier, we are bringing this energy into businesses, into small businesses, medium businesses, large ones, but also to the home of people. And finally, you see that as part of the energy system, you need, of course, the flexibility. You need also the local generation. You need to bring the services in understanding how you can help customers also to save energy, because net zero is a mix of having the capability to optimize the energy consumption and have it at the right time. And definitely, as you said, Andrew, the flexibility will also bring this possibility. In terms of a few figures, just to mention that, so EDF is the largest supplier of energy for British business, and we are also supplying electricity to 5 million residential customers in the UK. So I think this gives a picture. We are here to speak about EV, so I would like maybe to move to the next slide and introduce quickly. If you can go on, yes, please. What are EDF ambition in terms of EV and what we want to bring, which is across Europe. And this was an ambition that was set a couple of years ago, where EDF launched its e-mobility plan, and through which we want to become the leader in the main 4 markets in Europe, which is France, UK, Italy, and Belgium, in supplying electricity to EVs, in operating charge points, so bringing the capability to charge your cars in a different configuration, and finally being a leader in the smart charging, with 4,000 smart charging points deployed by 2020. Smart charging being absolutely key for EDF as part of the transition to net zero and as part of the electrification of transport. And if you can move to the next slide, I will also quickly introduce a little bit how we are doing all of that. So the idea is to make the journey for a customer, whether it's a B2B customer or B2C customer who wants to move to an electric vehicle, to find in one place all the information and all the support that are necessary to understand what is the right car, what is the right charging infrastructure, what is the right tariff to be able to benefit from I mean, to enjoy as much as possible this new experience, as well as I would say bringing the capability of the vehicle to grid, so the smart charging at its I would say most advanced solution. And so putting all EDF capabilities together, which you can see also on that slide, so working with PodPoint, with Ubitricity, with Drive, in order to propose to customer a simple way to optimize as much as possible their conversion to electric vehicle. So I would say it's in a nutshell, Andrew, what EDF is doing and how we are doing that, and looking forward for the discussion in a few minutes.
Great, thank you, Vincent, for that overview. So yeah, Evie, our next presenter from UK Power Networks. I'll hand over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew. So I'm Evie Trollope. I work at UK Power Networks as an innovation project lead, and my primary role at the moment is looking at electric vehicle flexibility projects. So that includes smart charging and vehicle to grid projects. And I work within the innovation team, but also working closely with our smart grid teams, network planning and connections as well as part of those projects. So if we could just go to the next slide. Oh, sorry. Can we go to the next slide, please? I'll keep talking, and if we can change slides when possible, that would be great. Thanks. So UK Power Networks, in case you don't know who we are the distribution network operator for the southeast of England. We distribute electricity to 8.3 million customers, and most people don't really actually know who we are until they need a connection or need something from us. So we are just there running in the background and providing electricity to meet customers' needs. But recently, the way we've been working has changed, both as a result of increased uptake of electric vehicles and preparing for that in the future. But we're also moving towards being a distribution system operator, which means that we're looking to utilise the network in a more active way. So as part of that, quite recently, actually, we awarded 123 megawatts of flexible capacity, which is the biggest highest value tender in the UK to date, and that's up from 19.3 megawatt last year. So you can see just how rapidly these markets are evolving and how quickly things are changing. They also included 15 low voltage sites, which is a first in the world, I believe. Just to sort of illustrate the challenges we're facing as well in terms of electrification of transport. So at the moment, we've got 94,000 electric vehicles connected in our patch. And by 2030, we're forecasting that's going to increase to 3.6 million based on our distribution future energy scenarios. That's a huge increase. We're looking at lots of different ways that we can ensure that we optimise the use of existing network capacity, and then where we need to invest strategically to make sure that we meet customers' needs as that demand arises on the network. So if we go to the next slide. So this just gives you a quick overview of our electric vehicle strategy. So underpinning the overall strategy is the fact that we want to enable the decarbonisation of transport and improve air quality and move to a net zero future, which I'm sure a lot of you are in the same position and have similar objectives. But then underpinning that, we have three different pillars. Those are establishing appropriate investment tools, so providing both internal and external stakeholders the ability to understand how we connect and manage electric vehicles on the network, what things they need to consider, and how we plan for that uptake. There's the customer experience pillar. So it's explained in more detail in our strategy, but what we're doing is making sure that we're looking across different customer segments, whether that be domestic consumers who charge possibly at home or on street, right through to commercial fleets, buses, and everything in between, and understanding what their particular needs are and how we can best serve those customers. And then finally, there's the network readiness element. So that's the bit that I'll talk a little bit more about, and that relates to the sort of the box in the bottom right corner. And what we're doing to ensure that we have a network that's ready for EVs is forecasting. So looking at where uptake's going to happen, when it's going to happen, and the distribution for future energy scenarios that I mentioned earlier are a big part of that. And if you'd like more information on those, they're actually published on our open data portal, which includes our forecast at quite a granular level and makes that data available for people to utilise. Once we've forecasted where the uptake's going to occur, what we then need to do is sort of monitor the real network conditions. So looking at where that load is actually materialising and understanding a bit more, or getting better visibility on those areas of the network, whether that's through our own equipment like LV monitoring or third-party data. Once we've identified that there may be a constraint or an opportunity to better use existing capacity, the first thing that we would do is look at deploying smart. And within that box, it's essentially a toolkit of different commercial and technical solutions that we can use to optimize existing network capacity. So network reconfiguration or more commercial solutions like timed connections, and smart charging and vehicle to grid fit into that deploy smart sort of category. And then finally, what's quite important is that we also need to invest strategically. So between monitoring, forecast, deploy smart, we will then have a much better understanding of where we do need to invest in the network to meet customers' needs at the lowest cost, and where that's the right solution. And I think part of the overall strategy is that we know that data is incredibly important in underpinning all of those elements, and we need to collaborate with industry in order to deliver and achieve our goal of decarbonising transport at the lowest cost to customers. So next slide. So to hone in on the smart charging and vehicle to grid aspects, I'll just take you through two of the most relevant projects in this space. So we've got a project that's called Shift, and what Shift is doing is exploring market-led approaches to smart charging, which is something that hasn't been looked at in a lot of detail before. And what we're looking at in particular is 3 different mechanisms to incentivise smart charging, which is shown in the bottom of the slide. So capacity-based pricing, time of use, distribution use of system charges, and flexibility procurement. And what we're doing is we're partnering with industry, so EV Energy, Kaluza, and Octopus, to test how these different mechanisms can be translated into customer propositions to incentivise smart charging, and then understanding what level of response we can get from the market from those. So each of those trials is currently running. They've been running for about 6 months. We're trialling it with 300 customers per trial, and through that already we've actually accelerated the development of the LV flexibility tenders that I mentioned earlier, and we're starting to analyse the data and get a better understanding of what factors do impact the reliability of service, and understanding how we should best implement those in the future, and what considerations we need to make around smart charging. To take that a step further, we're also looking at vehicle to grid, as I mentioned, and that's being done through a project called Transpower. And the benefit with vehicle to grid is that, in addition to sort of minimising the impact of electric vehicles on the network, by being able to discharge either to the grid or offset your demand, you can now also offset demand from other customers. And we're looking at different ways you can do that, whether it's on at a domestic level, which we're doing with Octopus Energy in the Power Loop trial, through to commercial fleets with Nissan on the E for Future project, double-decker buses with SC Enterprise on the Bus to Grid project, and we also did a commercial demonstration project with the Vita Street Consortium as part of the, which was run by Outside Energy. So working across all the different customer segments, understanding how things work where, and making sure that we understand how each of those different customer segments works and where best we can utilise both smart charging and vehicle to grid to maximise the use of existing network capacity. And just finally, so there's also a number of other projects that we've got, and at the top of the slide in grey, you'll be able to see that we've got an innovation website. So if you're interested, I'd recommend having a look at that. If V2G is specifically of interest, we've got a website called the V2G Hub, which has a number of features, and it summarises all the other innovation projects in the space around the world. So it's a really good resource for learning. But yeah, overall, like I said, the ultimate aim is to make sure that we are enabling the transition to net zero at the lowest cost to customers, and continuing to improve and refine our assumptions, refine forecasts, and enable people to meet their customers' needs.
Great, thank you, Evie. That was a really nice overview of the different, your approach and the different initiatives, of course, that you're progressing with. So thank you very much, and thank you also, Vincent, for the introduction. So we're now going to move on to our kind of panel discussion and Q&A session. So just as a reminder for those who are listening in, if you do have a question, then please do log that on the webinar page, and we'll do our best to pick that up. Again, yeah, thank you, Vincent and Evie, for those introductions, and I'm just kind of keen to get some, your just initial reactions to of course the uptake of alternative fuel vehicles and EVs, etc. And climate change, committing climate change, gave a number of views out to even within the next decade that just focusing on EVs, like goods vehicles, will be cost competitive with their internal combustion engine alternatives. So that's less than now, kind of 10 years away. And okay, heavy goods vehicles, buses, etc. There's perhaps different technology choices between hydrogen and electric. And we, as many of us know and will see, of course, that the vehicle manufacturers are launching new models with increasing range and also bringing those down that are more kind of cost attractive. So I'm just going to be very keen to get some of your initial reactions, maybe starting with you, Vincent, around clearly the shift to alternative fuel vehicles is already happening. What's your view, and what are you doing to accelerate this over the next the next decade? How big is this for you?
Yeah, so thank you, Andrew, for this question. I would just start with an interesting statistic, which is the sales or registration of battery electric vehicle in June 2020 in the UK, which is 260% of what it was last year. So you said the shift is accelerating. This is definitely accelerating, and it's coming really impressive. And definitely we need to be ready in terms of customer proposition, in terms of charging infrastructure, and in terms of just infrastructure to go on the UK Power Network challenges with this happening. What we do to be part of that, I would say we start with with doing that for ourselves. So we are doing that for our own fleet. We are part of the EV100 project, and we are deploying and we are shifting our own fleet to electric vehicle. We are doing that for our employees. We've put in place some using the support from the government with the salary sacrifice scheme and benefiting from some really good tax incentive to support the acquisition of EV from customers and employees. And finally, because we are doing EV for our own fleet and helping our employees to get EV via the salary sacrifice scheme, we are also deploying a lot of charge points on our own sites in order to avoid, I would say, the difficult situation where an employee is buying a car thanks to the scheme and he can't get it charged in the office. So it's something which we are investing time and money to make sure that we can close the loop and propose the best possible experience to our employees. But we are also working closely with our customers, and I would say EDF is a long-term supplier of energy for the public sector, and so definitely we want to be also a partner in the huge challenge of electrifying the fleet for the public sector, as well as proposing to people in the cities and in the council access to public charging or to a lot of different type of charging. So that's that's the way we are trying to be part of that.
Great, thanks. No, thanks, Vincent. Yeah, so I think important to, as you said, we'll start from within as well. Through your own organisations and employees. And Evie, maybe just introductory remarks from you on the kind of similar question around what are some of the things you're doing to accelerate adoption?
Yeah, so I think the slide that I first showed around how many current EVs we've got on the network versus how many we're forecasting by 2030, which is 3.6 million, kind of reiterates the importance of us being an enabler and a facilitator of those customers being able to connect to our network, get the energy they need to meet their mobility needs when and where they want. So we've had a lot of projects focusing on EVs. I think starting back as far back as 2010 with like the Low Carbon London project. And we've continued to focus on EVs up until now. I think previously we've probably had more of a focus on some of the easier to understand areas like at home, off street, and there's been more of a focus perhaps on connections and how we get customers connected. That's kind of transitioned into business as usual now. And what we're focusing on innovation and the smart grid team is looking at how we can provide opportunities to utilize those assets in the smartest way and create value both for networks and for customers. So it's kind of like a twofold approach. I think we've pretty well got good processes to enable people to connect, and it's now about looking at how we can create value and focusing on some of those more difficult segments that are less certain, so around the heavy goods vehicles, buses, and making sure that we also create the right solutions to enable them to meet their energy needs so that everyone can benefit from a net zero future.
Thanks, Evie. So I think that this is going to be hugely transformational over the next even the next decade if we are to kind of step in time with net zero. So thank you. Thanks for that. You both kind of touched upon, I think Evie, you touched upon the kind of customer here, and I'd kind of like to move on a little bit, and there's also kind of a couple of questions have come through, but transport, and we can probably focus back down from EVs for a second, but transport's often seen as a bit of an infrastructure kind of investment. We use and indeed we use transport to get around and as a means from getting from A to B. Picking up on today's theme around flexibility. EVs, they have potential to be these active participants in the energy system, of course, and draw upon their flexibility. So maybe, Vincent, to start with you, that will need an element of participation and an element of customer engagement, of course. And I'm curious to get your views around how far you think customers are going to go to engaging with their electric vehicle, for example, as a flexible asset. What's in it for them? What's the value to them? Perhaps beyond some mandatory kind of smart charging, which we're already seeing. So yeah, but you're really keen to get your views on that kind of customer engagement side.
Yeah, so I think from a customer point of view, I think you've said it, Andrew. You need to the customer needs to clearly understand what's in for them. So if we can find a way where the vehicle to grid or the smart charging is bringing additional value to the customer without bringing additional constraints, that's the way we can have these customers engaged and happy to share their battery as a flexible asset. We also need to bear in mind the fact that there are some concerns from customers about the fact that if you put your battery as a flexible asset, then there will be an impact on the degradation of the battery. So that's something that in EDF we are doing a lot of research with our R&D teams in France to simulate the impact on battery of using it as a flexible asset rather than using it as the engine of the car. And we're also working very closely with Nissan, with whom we have a partnership in order to really understand and again reassure the customer that actually using the battery as a flexible asset is not going to degrade, and you can have some guarantee around that. What's seen for the customer is really also making sure that the customer experience, the customer journey is the right one, which needs to be the one of an EV driver first. If you say to a customer, let me play with your battery as a flexible asset, and I will tell you when you can drive it because I am the one who is going to control it, that's probably not going to work very well. So we need to find a way where the customer is still controlling and monitoring and deciding on what he can do with his car. And then I would say the smart charging proposition needs to adapt to that and create as much value as possible with the battery when it is available for being a flexible asset. Finally, I would say that there is, of course, an economic part of that. So we need to find a way, we need to find a business model where we can really propose to the customer to have access to part of the remuneration or the revenue that we can obtain from providing grid services, and that's again, this revenue sharing is also a way to incentivize the customer to become I would say happy to share their battery in the car as a flexible asset rather than having it waiting 90% of the time on the parking for the people to use it. So it's finding the right balance between all of these different opportunities and constraints, and I would say respecting the customer expectation is definitely the right approach for me.
Great, thanks, Vincent. And maybe just a follow-up question, which has come in as well. I mean, there's obviously there's a potential kind of role and participation there from the individual kind of domestic consumer who has the EV. Do you think that the markets will evolve such that individuals can participate in flexibility, or do you see potential role for aggregators, maybe in a similar way in terms of what we're seeing already with larger kind of business roles? And yeah, how do you have any views on which way this market might emerge, or the one way you would like it to emerge as well, perhaps?
Yeah, so I would say both, definitely, and it's probably something that will be a transition. You will have first something that will go through aggregators or through people that are able to put together a lot of different small assets in order to give them in optimization for the flexibility platform. On your slide, Xavier, there was the mention of Upside Energy, which we are working with as well to develop this kind of proposition. But Andrew, definitely, I am fully convinced that there will be a moment when we will be able to flex the asset of people in their home. And when I'm saying that, is not necessarily only the EV. It will be most probably first the EV, but then I think we will be also able to flex and to use the flexibility that you may have in a fridge or in a freezer or in some other asset that people have at home that have existing flexibility or potential for flexibility, and that will benefit both the grid and the people. So yeah, I look forward to it, and I think this is a completely a part of the smart meter program, because you need the smart meter to be able to have access to these assets which are at home of our customers, of the people, and so all of that is really linked together.
Yeah, understood. No, that yeah, very much. EV will be in many instances become the kind of largest electricity load. So yeah, I can see how I can see both how this market may evolve, and as you suggested. Evie, can I bring you in now in terms of from a network operator's perspective? I mean, how big do you see the transport as as being that kind of flexible asset on your system, and how are you valuing that? I guess I know that's a big question, perhaps, but yeah, I guess it's how how you're viewing that from your own kind of day-to-day operation and planning perspective as well.
Yeah, sure. I think there's definitely a huge potential for EV flexibility, and the real key is for us to understand more about where and what the real value is from that. So I think first and foremost, in terms of the way we view transport, our first objective is to make sure that we meet customers' needs, and I think that's really important, that when we're looking at any of these solutions, smart charging, V2G, etc., that it works for customers, and that we build the trust that their vehicle is going to be ready when they want it, in order to use it for its primary purpose, which is for transport. And then once we've built that trust, we can start to bring in these other offerings, and that's why we're sort of partnering with industry to translate these different services that you could provide to the network and into propositions that work for the customers at the different levels, so whether that's commercial or domestic. I think what's important as well is that, so for example, for the domestic level, what we're looking at is different types of mechanisms. So at a domestic level, we're looking at more generalised price signals, which would send a wider response in the first instance, and we're testing different mechanisms for doing that through Shift. And I think underpinning that, we need to put customers in control. So what our project partners on Shift have done is make sure that they enable customers to set their preferences and enable them to like override scheduling if they want to, so that they maintain that level of control. And through some customer research we did with about 800 motorists earlier in the Shift project, we found that was ranked really highly in terms of importance to customers, that they really valued that ability to maintain the control themselves. So things like that are really critical in terms of actually being able to utilise the flexibility, and for people to accept these different propositions and make that flexibility available. Sort of going beyond that, in terms of the mechanisms, we also need to understand how reliable the services that can be provided are. So looking at how consistent the services and what the impact in terms of shifting the demand is over time. Because in order to unlock the value of these different flexibility services, so smart charging and V2G, they need to create value for networks, and like you said earlier, to defer or minimise the amount of reinforcement, that shift in behaviour has to be quite consistent. So those are the kind of things that we're looking to understand further, looking at what the flexibility window is for different customers, and then seeing, like, reapplying those into our forecasts to improve our outlook of how those different propositions would help us in the future, and where we will need to invest strategically.
Yeah, super. No, thanks, Evie. I've had a couple of questions come through just on demand forecasting. I think it kind of picks up a couple of things around how EVs kind of fit into to kind of broader other potential investments in low carbon technologies in the homes. And I'm going to come back to that, if that's okay, because I've also had quite a few come in from a kind of infrastructure perspective. So if it's okay, I'll kind of move on to I guess the kind of infrastructure needs now. And again, and many people listening in, of course, will know that there's a tremendous amount of investment that's required, even just in charging infrastructure alone, as well as the network investment and capacity investment. So, I mean, I think, again, committing climate change, over £9 billion is going to be required in EV charging infrastructure alone, which is an awful lot of money, of course, a relatively short period of time, if you're to believe that 2030. Price parity with internal combustion engines, etc. Now, of course, how that portfolio of charging infrastructure evolves in the UK. There's questions around the balance between charging speeds. There's questions around even battery sizes in vehicles, and of course, in terms of when and where to invest in the network. So that, again, quite a few questions, as unsurprisingly, around this area. So Vincent, maybe coming to you to give your perspective as a a utility and a supplier's perspective. How are you thinking about the types of charging infrastructure that the UK is going to need? Is it faster charging or is it smarter charging? How are you viewing the kind of longer term plan
So
for this?
yeah. So I think again, what I like to do is when trying to answer this question is to understand what is the customer needs. So what do an EV driver needs when they are going to go on the road and they want to make sure that they can do all of their journey and they can charge their car in the best possible location. So I think the way to answer that is probably is a mix of everything, to be honest, because I think you will have, and usually we see four categories of charging, I would say, which correspond to four different utilization of charge point and which correspond actually most probably to also four different speed of charging. So the first one is at home. So it's when the customer is charging his car at its own home. And in that case, because of the duration, so it's usually someone that will stay in the same place for a few hours overnight, usually. And so in that case, you don't need a rapid or a very ultra rapid charger. You just need something that is able to charge the battery within the 8, 10, 12, 14 hours that the car will stay on the same place. The second category is at work. And again, at work is probably a very similar where you will have a mix of charger that don't need to be very fast, and some of them might be a little bit faster because you will have most of the people will stay for a long period of time, for a few hours in the office. Some people will just be a visitor that will stay for a meeting, so 1 hour or a couple of hours. So you want to provide to these customers, to these drivers, the right solution for their charging. So at work, you will have a different mix of solution. And at work is probably also the place where you will try and have a lot of smart charging, because you don't want to penalize and to have, as Avi mentioned before, a lot of grid reinforcement work to be done in order to satisfy always the peak capacity that could arrive on the grid if all the charge points available are connected with cars. You want to manage that, taking into account the numbers of cars, the type of cars, the duration of stay, and so on and so forth. The third one is what we call at destination. So when someone is going to a place where they will spend something between 1 to 2 hours, so it's a supermarket or a coffee shop where they can spend a little bit more time. And in that case, you will need again a speed of charging that will match the duration of stay of the customer. And also the smart charging in that case will be potentially accessible. And finally, the last category is what we call en route. So is when people are doing long journey from one point to the other point, and they need to charge during this journey because the range is not enough to do the full journey. And again, this is also improving a lot with the size and the capacity of the battery, which is increasing, and the efficiency as well of the battery. So the en route will be the situation where you have the most rapid charger, where you can provide almost or the big part of a charge in 15, 20, 30 minutes maximum. And this will be located in places where customer will be able to have a comfort break or have a coffee. So spend 10, 15, 20 minutes on the same place and using that time to charge their car. And in that case, for this very fast, very rapid charging, the smart part of it is probably less critical because you won't have the opportunity to play with the energy in the battery, because the only target in that case is to put as much energy as possible in as less time as possible in the car. And so this will not be really something that works really well for smart charging opportunities.
Okay.
I hope this answers your question.
Yeah, no, it's quite covered all of the bases there, Vincent. And I guess to summarize that, the kind of smartness, I guess, as you said, maybe is more at the lower voltage level and at homes or in places of work. And I can understand the faster where you're moving between destinations, etc. Just to follow up on one point, and a question came through around those individuals, families, people who can live in flats or in terraced houses where there's no driveway or an opportunity to park, right outside their front door, and clearly not just in the UK but also elsewhere across Europe and elsewhere in the world, there are flats and such infrastructure. So any thoughts around how charging accommodates for those types of situations?
I think this is something which is also probably down to I mean, the public charging and whether the public charging is the responsibility of local authorities or is the responsibility also of some private investor. I think it's going to be a mix, but definitely I think is one of the big challenges that we will have to face is to make sure that there are charging solutions for all the different profile and type of people that will drive an EV. And definitely, as we all know, people having parking at home is not the common part. It's most of the people don't, and so definitely it's something which absolutely necessary. And that's why also if you look at what I mentioned before on my slide, the last slide. EDF is definitely we made the acquisition of PodPoint to propose a full range of solutions of charging solutions, but we are also working very closely with UB3City with proposing some smart solution for charging cars and installing charge point on a lamp post in the street. So that's something which is quite easy and simple. So having all these different solutions, having all these different way of charging is definitely going to propose also solutions to a lot of different people, and in particular people who don't have home parking, I would say.
Yeah, thanks, Vincent. And Evie, just turning to you now. I mean, from Vincent's kind of overview there, this infrastructure needs to happen at all parts of the network. From the fast charging right down to low voltage. And so yeah, so how does this mean that capacity is just required across the whole of the network, and how does that fit in with how are you thinking that through, I guess? And again, from a flexibility perspective, as you've already mentioned, that brings a little bit of optionality perhaps, and keen to understand how how you approach this planning for this significant investment in infrastructure that's required.
Yeah, I think the first point is definitely for forecasting and modelling. So what we need to do is make sure that we have the best view of where and when EV uptake and other load growth is going to happen, and then what the impact of that is on the network. So we use a lot of internal and external sources of data to inform that view, as well as a lot of collaboration with stakeholders in the industry, including local authorities, understanding what their ambitions are, particularly around net zero, and making sure that we understand how that will sort of impact the network in particular areas. So going down to quite a granular level and understanding how the future looks is the first sort of step. Once we've done that, you need to look at the current state of the network and understand where that capacity is going to be available, and understanding where there might be constraints. And to support that, what we need to do is increase the visibility, particularly on the low voltage network. So things like the LV visibility program that we have running, and also looking to use other devices or sources of data to inform what the network conditions are, so that we can start to validate those forecasts and then understand where issues are likely to occur. Once we've understood if there is a sort of need, that's when we start to look at the flexibility solutions. And UK Power Networks is committed to a flexibility first approach, which means before doing any reinforcement, we've committed to exploring flexible options, whether that be through flexibility tenders or other solutions. And those include things like the timed connection. So if a particular customer wants to convert, so for example, like a bus garage to being electric, we understand their needs in terms of their demand, and we could offer more novel sort of commercial arrangements that enable us to maximise the use of existing network capacity where it's available, as opposed to investing in the network. But then importantly, as well as sort of balancing that by looking at what other load growth is expected in a particular area. And one of the other key elements at the moment that we're exploring further is decarbonisation of heat. So looking at where there's synergies, looking at what else is going to impact the network in the long term, and then making sure we make the right assessment and use our investment tools that we have to select the lowest cost option that will meet customers' needs, and then ensuring that that's ready as and when it's required.
Great, thanks, Evie. That's nice and clear, and good to see. Of course, the flexibility element is that flexibility first approach. I'm conscious of time, and I've seen quite a few questions come through as well. So I'm going to try and kind of manage that just by kind of moving on to coming back to an area around consumer and consumer innovation, and maybe Vincent, again, to come back to you. So if we are viewing electric vehicles, we've kind of focused a lot on the kind of electric side of today's discussion. I know that it goes beyond that, of course, but I guess coming back to EVs as energy assets, and customer propositions and solutions. We touched a little on smart charging and aggregation, etc. But how do you see that trajectory around kind of innovation around tariffs and propositions, but also and I think we've touched on this already, just in terms of the other types of infrastructure solutions that are developing, be that bundling EVs with solar PV, or with storage, or with other forms of local kind of generation, or flexibility. And I guess good to get some views from you on how you see the product and the proposition evolution linked to EVs going out over time.
So I mean, without sharing too much of commercially protected information, but that's definitely a place where, I mean, EV tariff and proposition and all around charging and I mean, your question is really a hot topic currently on how we can really be innovative and shaping something which is corresponding to the behavior of the customer. I think this is probably one of the big questions that we will have to answer, and when working with car manufacturer is a way to answer that, is understanding the behavior of the customer. So having a better understanding of what are their expectations in order to make sure that what we are trying to propose them is actually corresponding to what they are expecting from their driver's experience, and not only thinking as an energy consumer, but as an EV driver, which is a very different perspective, as you can imagine. And definitely we started with talking about net zero. If you don't consider how you can bring together the right EV tariff, the right charging solution with some solar and some storage, you are not really considering net zero as it should be. So definitely we are trying to build all of that together, to see how we can really design that. As I mentioned before, the smart meter is completely part of that proposition as well, because the smart meter will give us the possibility to have a very granular understanding of the energy consumption of a customer, and so to design and to build the tariff that will really follow the customer consumption, and it's by having the right data on how the consumer is using electricity, that we can really shape the right proposition. So there is a lot happening on in EDF at that time to understand the data, to make sure that we are working with the right partners and building the best proposition to support this rollout of EV for the UK.
Thanks, Vincent. And to Evie, I mean, of course, we know the distribution network operators moving to distribution system operators and taking a greater role, of course, in how that local infrastructure is optimized, etc. And that, of course, implies that you need to understand the customer and the relationship with customers better, if you like. And so, to what extent do you feel that you'll engage directly with consumers, going forward, to kind of help this engagement and the management, if you like, of flexibility, for example, with a changing transport sector?
I think it definitely depends on the customer. So we know that some customers are really keen to engage with us directly, whereas other customers would prefer to have something quite automated and probably go through a service provider and just have an app or something very simplistic that enables them to provide flexibility. But our role as a distribution system operator is to facilitate the customer and give them the freedom to choose what they would like to do. So we're trying to facilitate the highest engagement possible that we can, and the highest participation in flexibility markets that we're offering, because that's what's best for us. And then we provide a range of sort of opportunities to do that, whether that's via a service provider or directly. And I think in order to do that, we've also sort of recently looked at our own processes and assessed ways that we can actively remove barriers to entry. So, for example, we recently reduced the low voltage flexibility threshold to 10 kilowatts to try and make it more accessible to the smaller providers, or so that people could directly respond to those as an individual customer. And in a similar sort of process, we were also looking at how we contract for that flexibility. So how do we provide reliability in terms of services? So looking at things like increasing contract lengths up to 7 years and helping provide that certainty to customers, so that some of those people who have maybe smaller portfolios are able to participate and compete and have that consistency. I think the other point is around, we're quite short on time, so I'll be quick with this. It's just important that we collaborate with our stakeholders and continue to get feedback from people. So a huge part of making those changes is that we've been really actively engaging with our stakeholders and understanding what they want. And so as we continue to evolve to a DSO, which is happening at a very quick pace, I think just keeping that open engagement is super important to make sure that we are providing what people want.
Super. Thank you, Evie. Yeah, kind of echo those words around engagement, collaboration as we navigate this. I think we're going to have to stop there. And I know there were quite a few more questions that were coming through there, and we can get back through email if required, and we can follow up on those individual ones. I'd just like to kind of give you a brief introduction or follow up on our final webinar, which is next Tuesday at the same time, which we will focus in on the decarbonisation of heat and the role for flexibility, joined by Matt Watson from Western Power Distribution and Keith Owen from his role in Institute of Gas Engineers and Managers. So do look out for that one and join in the usual way. Thank you for listening. Thank you to our panelists and joining and giving their views on this fascinating topic. All the recordings of the 3 webinars last week, this week, and the following week will be emailed to all attendees at the end of the series. You can sign up for next week's webinar through our newsletter and our website. And if you would like any more information on the topics we've discussed today or broader energy systems flexibility related topics, then you can catch us in info@carbontrust.com. There is a short feedback pop up at the end of the webinar, and we would really appreciate your feedback so that we can take those in for learning for future sessions. Thank you again for listening. Thank you again, Vincent and Evie, and have a good rest of the afternoon. Thank you.